Thank you very much for inviting me and for the opportunity to give a brief presentation of how research and development can contribute to a greener economy. I represent the Research Council of Norway, a research council with a very broad mandate to support long-term basic research, to implement national thematic priorities, and to promote industrial innovation in partnership with industry and by forging closer links between research and industry. I will start by repeating the magnitude of the global energy challenges. Based on this, I will, in the second part of my intervention, strongly advocate heavy investments in research and developments and explain how we have implemented increased funding over the latest years as an example of what is needed. The global energy situation calls urgently for new clean solutions. This slide shows the global energy demand towards 2030 in a business-as-usual scenario taken from the World Energy Outlook. The scenario illustrates the development that might take place if only the policies implemented as of today are in place. That is, no new policies. The key points are that the world is facing strong growth in energy demand over the next decades. 2/3 of the growth is from developing countries or emerging economies. Still, it is predicted that as many as 1.2 billion people will lack access to electricity in 2030, and 2.7 million will rely on traditional biomass for cooking. So we face a dual challenge, ensuring access to energy for all, and the environmental impact of this demand growth. And these challenges are coupled. Coal is in most cases the first step on the energy development ladder after traditional biomass. And coal use in developing countries has a serious impact on global CO2 emissions, as the next slide shows. Here we show the development of a global CO2 emissions equivalent of the previous slide that shows the global energy demand. The key points here are that it is predicted no increase in CO2 emissions from OECD countries towards 2030, even in a business-as-usual scenario. But the consequences for global CO2 emissions from the increased demand in developing countries is staggering, despite that in this scenario many people will lack access to commercial energy. And the growth is predominantly driven by increased coal use. So how can these trends be altered in a more sustainable direction? The Energy Agency has analyzed what it would take to move from a business-as-usual development to a sustainable scenario. The upper line shows the development of global CO2 emissions till 2050 in a business-as-usual scenario. That is the same as the previous slide, but 20 years longer. The lower line illustrates global CO2 emissions in a scenario which is consistent with a target of 2 degrees global warming. In between these two lines are the technology options that can realize the emission reduction between the two scenarios. We must conclude that we need nothing less than an energy revolution. The analysis shows that we need a multitude of technologies. Hence, we need to have strong focus on developing and deploying CCS, renewables solutions, and not least, improve energy efficiency. But this revolution will not be costly in terms of need for new investments. It is an important point that the increased investments will, to a large degree, be offset by less need for buying the energy itself. That is, we need to invest more in technologies such as wind turbines, solar cells, more efficient cars, but buy less oil, gas, and coal. In a way, the global picture is equivalent to the situation where you buy a heat pump that saves energy. It requires upfront investments, but the savings over the future years as energy bills will hopefully outweigh the increased investment costs. And, which is very important, the increased investments will in return open enormous markets for technology. It will open enormous markets for new technology. But this scenario will not come by itself. It will not only require investments in markets, but also in research and development. In fact, investing in research and development is a key. Without developing more efficient and less costly technologies, the costs of the transition to a greener energy will be much higher. The good news then are that R&D constitutes only a small fraction of the total investments cost, but we need to move fast to develop new technologies that can replace less efficient ones. Hence, R&D efforts must be scaled up early, and it will require significant involvement by governments. In Norway, we have taken a first important step in scaling up governmental spending on R&D for clean energy based on a broad political agreement in the parliament. It resulted in a substantial increase in budgets for environmental friendly energy in 2008, 9 and 10. In fact, in my years as head of the Research Council, this is the most significant increase we have had. This enabled the RCN to establish a strategic and structuring long-term effort in areas where Norway can make a difference. With the budget increase, we had a unique opportunity to draw on our toolbox as a research council. We implemented the increase through a palette of funding instruments, different funding instruments. The major share, of course, of the increase was channeled through our large-scale program on clean energy, and also on establishment of new research centers in the field. We were also able to increase funding for our targeted program on CCS. These main instruments were supplemented by programs in RCN that may have a broader focus than clean energy, but that still have important contributions for developing new energy solutions. Examples of forest resources for biomass energy, nanomaterials, and basic research programs. We were also able to boost funding for R&D infrastructure, very important for energy R&D. What happens when you increase funding significantly over few years? We could have experienced that this rapid increase would overflow the R&D market. But instead, we saw a massive mobilization where particularly R&D institutes were active. But also the universities mobilized both in projects related to more basic science and not at least through a large increase in PhD students and postdocs. Very important to ensure the brains we need for this huge energy revolution. Last but not least, the increased budgets open up for more participation from industry, in most cases in close collaboration with institutes and universities. The result of this mobilization is that the new resources were swiftly absorbed and without any quality reduction. We still have to turn down excellent applications for new projects. And today, the Clean Energy Program has 250 active projects with approximately 1,000 partners. A recent evaluation of this program shows that it has succeeded in mobilizing also industry. More than 80% of the Renegi scientists who participated in the evaluation process answered that they cooperated with industry. The evaluation also shows that the increased research effort has led to a considerably higher competence level in the science communities and mobilized the science communities. By this, we have developed science groups strong enough to compete on the international arena. The Renegi program, with its annual calls, is also important to strengthen and supplement the new centers we established. And now the centers. It was a strategic move to establish 11 research centers in environmental friendly energy. Our intention with the centers were concentration on the best Norwegian competence and promote collaboration in a long-term focused effort. Increase the efforts in areas where Norway can make a difference due to resources, industry, and competence. Stimulate cooperation between education, research, and industry, and make visible spearheads for international R&D collaboration. Our experience is that the establishment of the centers have been successful so far. They provide a long-term structuring focus, and very important, the centers work very well in combination with our programs, in that the same partners can apply for more targeted projects in the program annual calls. Back to the title of my talk to sum up. We need a global energy revolution to combat climate change and to provide energy access for all. The revolution will open up huge markets for clean energy solutions. Increased R&D efforts will be crucial for the revolution and to provide the knowledge that industry will need to develop the technologies that can capture the markets. It is urgent to scale up R&D funding early. This funding must be both strategic and long-term. We have taken a first important step to ensure Norway's contribution, but only a first step. The budget increase has allowed us to strengthen areas where we have advantages, strengthen international collaboration, mobilize R&D actors in universities, boost the involvement by industry. But R&D is not enough in itself. The solutions must be taken to the market. We have thus had an increased focus on also providing support to projects closer to market introduction. We have established a close collaboration with other organizations such as Enova and Innovation Norway to ensure support through the whole innovation chain from lab to market. The challenges are huge. I am sure that it is possible to mobilize a joint effort between academia, research, and industry to ensure that we have the knowledge, the competence, and the technologies needed for an energy revolution. Thank you very much.